ready, let's begin.
Okay. Is this clear enough? Okay, cool. Start. Okay. Hello, Ukraine. Thank you very much for still tuning in this conference. We are immensely sorry at the difficulties which you have been subject to in this pandemic today. We fully empathize with your situation, as being bullied by China is now everyday life, and we're so particularly grateful for this opportunity to speak to you today. And I hope to bring you some new perspectives of the current pro-democracy movement. So our movement started off as a protest against a proposed bill to amend the Fugitive Offender Ordinance and establish a mechanism for extraditing criminals to China. China is currently excluded from the existing laws because its legal system is state-controlled and does not guarantee the same fair trial or humane punishment in Hong Kong. Even before the protest, the amendments were widely criticized by Hong Kong's legal profession, both the Hong Kong Law Society and the Hong Kong Bar Association. Across the city were widespread fears of the plan serving as a tool to terrorize and persecute dissidents of Hong Kong and Chinese authorities, pro-democracy activists and human rights defenders, and to plunge extradited individuals into the danger of torture or ill treatment. Hong Kongers are not unfamiliar with cases in which critics of the CCP are abducted by Chinese agents and sent to the mainland. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but the 2015 Causeway Bay books disappearances in which Gui Minhai, a Chinese-born Swedish scholar and book publisher, along with 4 fellow staff members of this independent bookshop in Hong Kong, who sold books on Chinese politics back in mainland China, vanished without a trace and were subsequently found under detention in China. The extradition law amendment bill. Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Not really. So. Not really.
So, okay. Okay. Right, so on the background of the Fugitive Offender Ordinance, so currently, before the establishment of the amendment, the amendments were already widely criticized by Hong Kong's legal profession, by both the Solicitor Society, the Hong Kong Law Society, and the Hong Kong Bar Association. And because of across the city, there were widespread fears of the plan serving as a tool to terrorize and persecute dissidents of Hong Kong and Chinese authorities, pro-democracy activists and human rights defenders, and to plunge extradited individuals into the danger of torture or ill treatment. Hong Kongers are not unfamiliar with cases in which critics of the CCP are abducted by Chinese agents and sent to the mainland. The 2015 Causeway disappearances in which Gui Minhai, a Chinese-born Swedish scholar and book publisher, along with 4 fellow staff members of this independent bookshop in Hong Kong that sold books on Chinese politics banned in mainland China, vanished without a trace and were subsequently found under detention in China. The extradition law amendment bill sounded to Hong Kongers an ill-disguised attempt to advance, legitimize, and repeat these maneuvers. The movement was initially a reaction to this provincial bill, which would dismantle the constitutionally promised system of one country, two system principle, under which Hong Kong enjoys judicial and many other types of independence in China. These protests, the most famous two of which was the March Rebellion on the 9th of June, and the Admiralty protest on 12th of June, at which tear gas and the first round of rubber bullets in the movement was fired at unarmed protesters, did not stop the chief executive of Hong Kong, Ms. Carrie Lam, from charging ahead and asserting the bill through the legislature. Disillusioned with the apathy of the authority, Mr. Leung Ling Kip, fondly remembered as the Raincoat Man, threw himself off a pedestrian bridge and became the first martyr of the movement. The next day, over 2 million convened on the 16th of June to march before the courts and to grieve the Raincoat Man's death. This was then the iconic 2 million plus 1 march, an historical event for Hong Kong, which have so far never seen any protests above 1 million. And it was still back then an anti-extradition protest. But over time, we saw the crackdowns become increasingly violent, and the excessive use of both physical and chemical warfare by the police force worsened week by week. We also began protesting against police brutality. arbitrary arrest, and collusion with and assisting pro-Beijing gangsters in the indiscriminate assaults on civilians, manipulation and the use of metro system as sites of terrorist attacks conducted by the police on protesters and passengers, as well as the many cases of subsequently revealed torture, rape, disappearances, and alleged murders of protesters by the Hong Kong police. What is loaded into the water cannon engines is not just colored water, but sticky chemicals that are similar to those found in pepper sprays, where you'll feel itchy and it'll make your skin burn afterwards. The chemical added into the Chinese-made tear gas that they fire excessively on our streets causes irreversible damage to the human reproductive system. You might have heard of the number 721831. These were numbers that represented the two incidents in which we've seen like indiscriminate attacks against civilians. The 21st of July was when a gang of white shirt mob members marched into the Yunlong metro station to beat up civilians there. There were several policemen that were around that area, but they turned their backs on our civilians who needed their help. The 31st of August 831 was when the police marched into Prince Edward Station, metro station, and then indiscriminately beat up both civilians and protesters alike, spraying tear gas, spraying pepper spray into the metro cars. The Hong Kong and Chinese authorities' maniacal suppression of civil liberties and its erosion of human rights at the hand of the police force show the people of Hong Kong and the world that the regime does not mind exterminating an entire population of honest, steadfast, selfless civilians just because they have the capacity to think and disapprove of the ways of the Chinese communist regime. The ongoing movement runs on the realization that the true colors of the Hong Kong and Chinese communist regime are not to be trusted. This realization is refreshed and deepened by the police's daily assault on the peaceful and lawful protests, and by the horrific news of disappearances, obviously staged suicides, and unnatural deaths, which the police are always quick to rule out as unsuspicious and not warranting of an investigation. The realization keeps us going because we fear that if we ever give up our resistance, the regime will encroach what little freedoms we have left. Hong Kong is still Hong Kong at the moment because there's still freedom on the internet, but this pales in comparison to the rapid deterioration of our justice system that no longer protects those who have been arbitrarily arrested, who does not defend those who are being abused by police power of prosecution under the system. The crumbling division of powers and the loss of our way of life. Hong Kong is still Hong Kong ultimately because of its people. And the CCP does not like this, as we can see in Tibet and Xinjiang. This is because they don't want to see people with agency and independent minds, or people who have known another way to live than the way in China under constant scrutiny and surveillance of the state. To this regime, if you are Chinese, you are subject to their control and their control alone. When 2047 comes, which is the expiry date of our constitutional document, the Basic Law, that states that Hong Kong remains autonomous from China after the British left in 1997 for 50 years. Until then, officially, the people of Hong Kong will officially be slaves to China. I use the word officially because it is already happening right now. Life today is already life post-2047. Chinese extradition, even without efforts to reject it at the cost of making its life, already is happening. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but there are already 2 widely reported cases of distinct participants in the protest having been detained and tortured in China by the Chinese police. One of them, Simon Cheng, a staffer at the British Consulate General, reported back that he had seen many other Hong Kong protesters up there under the same treatment. Who knows if the fate of some arrestees was actually an extradition to China all along? The CCP uses force to get what it cannot get through rightful means. Now, these days we don't really talk about the extradition bill because it was just a PR package to disguise how the CCP is going to get away with this extradition. China will make it happen with or without any bills or amendments. It is the world's worst political regional and global. But still we fight on. It might seem incredulously we can win against this totalitarian regime. Maybe because of that. Maybe it's because of the fact that we have absolute faith in each other and in each other's ways of doing and participating in this movement. I think the most reported thing about our movement is that our movement at its core is very decentralized. We rely mainly on things like cloud-based communication technologies, online platforms, and applications like Telegram. We allow opinions and ideas from everyone and anyone to be heard. Whichever idea is best, our movement will adopt and implement. The contributions are anonymized in both the decision-making process and the execution of the plans. So therefore, the movement effectively manifests itself as a series of discussions and ideas settled by the law of averages, characterized by spontaneity, flexibility, and anonymity. This is the application of Bruce Lee's philosophy. The water, my friend, has thus become a constant reminder that one would give to his or her fellow Protestants, for water can flow or creep or drip or crash. The Protestants' course of action is formless, shapeless like water, as they have practically freestyled many of their protests. It is by this principle that Protestants act, often to the surprise of those who still expect leadership behind the curtain, giving directives and mobilizing people. In truth, this movement is a constellation of countless spontaneous action plans. Its mastermind is anyone and everyone. That is the reason why we have seen lately a lot more creative new ideas on how the Hong Kong people are protesting against the government, including the latest, the Yellow Economic Circle, whereby protesters would only visit shops that support the movement and boycott those that do not. The frontliners of peaceful protesters, the so-called hawks and doves, the local fighters and international lobbyists, scholars and politicians, the medics and suppliers. To other movements, they might seem like they're dualities, but in our movement, they complement each other. It is understood among protesters that in contributing in our own ways, we will eventually move towards the same outcome. This is why they've sworn by the principle of no derision, no division, no denunciation, out of the utmost respect for the unique contributions that other people might bring. That is the reason why, no matter how authorities search high and low for cracks in the solidarity, to divide the people and splinter the movement, they have never succeeded. Although it's true that we have some pronounced organizers of events activities, administrators of Telegram groups, or keeper of physical groups, no one so far would claim ownership of the movement. The advantage of a decentralized movement is that everyone owns it. Everyone is motivated to offer their part to the collective. The power in this form of resistance is the fact that it is infinite and inexhaustible, because there's always someone working on something else elsewhere. That is why our momentum is still strong 7 months into the movement, 7 months into our protest. Essentially, what we have been trying to achieve is for the Hong Kong government to actualize our 5 demands, which are agreed by consensus throughout all of our protesters. These are 1, withdrawal of the extradition bill; 2, retraction of the right characterization of the protests; 3, amnesty for all arrested protesters; 4, an independent inquiry into the police brutality; and 5, complete universal suffrage as promised in the Basic Law. We want the retraction of the riot characterization of the protest because any protester prosecuted on riot charges faces a sentence of up to 10 years, a clearly disproportionate sentence on the streets protesting as a peaceful protester. We want amnesty for all arrested protesters because of the police's arbitrary arrest, because we were protesting an unjust law. We want an independent inquiry into police brutality because the existing body, the Independent Police Complaints Council, has no actual power. This is perhaps most forcefully demonstrated when the international experts that Carrie Lam invited over to the IPCC resigned from their roles. We want complete universal suffrage because it has been promised to us in the Basic Law, and so far, the versions of democracy offered to us by the Chinese basically allows them to select the candidates we can vote for. Our 5 demands come in a package because they're interlocked together. So far, not only have the authorities refused us and treated us with brutal violence and oppression, they have also tried to rope us into settling for one of their hard-hearted needs. Our terms have always been based on these 5 demands being fulfilled, and authorities are relentless in their attempts to divert our attention by spoon-feeding us their lies. The good thing of not having a leader protects the movement from crumbling within, as it would in cases where the leadership either collapses on itself or gets targeted by the authorities with manipulated negotiations. There is no one to pick on and talk to specifically in this resistant movement, as this movement represents the voice of the many, and it's hard to fool or compromise the voices of the many. And because of this, by not playing by the book, we have gone from counting it by consecutive weeks to consecutive months. We have entered the 7th month of our resistant movement. This movement is now an anti-totalitarian movement, a pro-democracy movement, a human rights movement, a war in defense of Hong Kong, a revolution of our time. We will not stop until the day our 5 demands are achieved, and until the day that Hong Kong is returned to the right hands, which are the hands of its own people. We are Hong Kongers and we are unstoppable. Thank you.
So, Richard, I actually have a few questions here to ask of you. Thank you for giving your talk, giving your insights into why you are participating in this movement. Now we've heard so many accounts of police brutality, but the Hong Kong government continues to deny this. Can you explain a little bit about how the situation is now And some of us also might have a few reservations towards the level of violence used from the protester side. What would you say about that?
Okay. I'm going to start first with talking about the police brutality and what role it plays in the movement. So I think so far, until now, the Hong Kong crisis was and still is fueled by police brutality. If you look up police brutality on Google or Twitter, the first photos you're met with are not, for example, US instances of brutality, but Hong Kong protesters being subdued with excessive force and dragged across the ground by disproportionate numbers of police personnel. Police brutality is what the Hong Kong regime resorts to when it does not want to respond to dissidents through peaceful and lawful means. The police are now essentially a privileged class. The city is a police state. Hong Kong has turned into a city where the law enforcers are lawbreakers because they're backed by the central authority and have to bear no consequences for their action. The authority now rules by law and applies it however and whenever it pleases. The police are used as the enforcers and are given infinite resources and encouragement by the authority to suppress, terrorize, torture, and even kill their people. And police say with this boundless power themselves. As revealed in the allegations from within the police force, the police are unbounded by punishments or sanctions because they believe that they cannot be held accountable. Many plan to just earn enough of the highly considerable sums of overtime pay and then move to China or to pay legally to make retribution to their penny. And the way in which they do this is to show the identification number themselves. A move that the Secretary of John Lee has ludicrously stated to be because they have no room on the uniforms, which is obviously a lie because there's a lot of room on the uniforms to show a small badge. They consider themselves officers of society and they think of the protesters as weaklings, basically mocking their efforts to achieve justice for nothing in return. They have admitted to rape and murder, and we've seen on live stream, on recorded videos, that they deliberately pick on female protesters to deem fit and detain them at detention centers, which are now basically mini concentration camps. The police force is internally corrupt and made up of people who join simply because it is a quick and convenient way to rise quickly in status without much input or effort. An opportunity to play with hand weapons and feel empowered, enjoy ample welfare benefits, and get better paid than any other discipline services without good education as a prerequisite. We can see very clearly that the police has lost the trust of the people, seen by the most recent polls in which the Hong Kong police force has received the lowest amount of support in all of the other disciplinary service and emergency services in Hong Kong. So, you have to look at the bigger picture. Hong Kongers are up against psychologically twisted, militarily trained, armed, dangerous bullies, loads of thugs, as we've seen on the 21st of July, and are basically given the authority to violate them. The most recent case, and this video has been widely circulated around the internet, one where one of an unconscious, probably dead man, being squeezed out of a small window and dropped from the height of a distant service dormitory building in which he did not reside. If my facts are correct, the person who was filming this, one of the domestic helpers in Hong Kong, has not been arrested by the Hong Kong police. This incident was framed as a suicide by the police and the authorities, and immediately felt as unsuspicious. This is maybe one of the perhaps hundreds of over thousands of natural disasters expectedly caused and staged by the police over the past 6 months. I'm not sure if you've also heard of the case where a young female swimmer was found naked in the ocean, and the police was first to discover the corpse and then to say very quickly that there was nothing suspicious about the case, despite the fact that it couldn't quite be possible for a female swimmer to walk into the ocean naked and drown herself. So Hong Kongers are angry at all of that. This goes back to how the movement evolves out of being an anti-revolution movement. So the sad truth is that when we report incidents of police brutality, all of which are supported by live stream videos, which I encourage all of you to look at, the international community dismisses our accounts as all these statements melodramatic or exaggerated. This is maybe partly due to the fact that they are yet to wake up and open their eyes to the evil that seems to keep. Now, some of them are taking the fact that the protests are violence without pondering or looking deep into the reasons behind their actions. I think it's important to put things into perspective. So imagine if you're on the streets, right? Imagine this scenario, and riot police are charging towards you while firing tear gas. They quickly arrive behind you, and because you're able to run a bit faster, they grab the friend next to you, begin to come up, and you start gushing out of their head. You want to save them. You can't because this is a situation in which you either run away yourself, or you will be part of the same thing. What would be the internal contradiction that you feel when you abandon your friend to the potential torture, rape, or even death? Now let's imagine the same setting that this setting can cause yourself. Policeman sits on their back, lifts the mask up, raise pepper spray right in your eyes. Then they begin clubbing you in the head. Struggle to stay conscious when you feel a cue in your head, abandoned by a problem. So in this case, what do you do? Will you just resign yourself to police brutality? No, the most obvious response is where you fight back, right? With whatever is necessary. And the most important thing here is that not one police officer has been killed or gravely injured by the group. Now also imagine this. In recent weeks, more and more peaceful protests. So imagine like in front of a non-peaceful protest, only came up to exercise the right to protest against this murderous. And riot police are advancing with just 5 minutes prior warning, which the back of the crowd can't really see. And behind you is a group of unarmed protesters of all ages. The police have started firing tear gas into the crowd, and you have a Molotov cocktail on your hand. What would you do? Obviously, you would just throw it at the police, right? Imagine if you have friends or loved ones that disappeared after having gone to a protest and you can't locate them anywhere. Imagine the horror of thinking that they have been extradited to China for destruction or organ harvesting. Protesters aren't saints, we're just human. Well, we're angry and afraid for good reasons. But even so, the protesters never use force indiscriminately because we're terrorists and not because we're not irrational. You haven't seen us firebombing entire buildings. You've only seen us taking only the necessary steps to achieve the goals that we want to. In the case of the Hong Kong police, they used disproportionate violence and all laws of rules. They fired 2,000 tear gas before you were bricked. They blockaded off all university and refused anyone to go in. Not even convicts of serious crimes are subject to unwarranted pre-trial detention and torture, let alone being killed by the police. The principle of proportionality does not constrain the police anymore, and the discrimination towards protesters is nil. So how are the people supposed to protect themselves and comply with the laws like this? No one would take these kinds of actions if they had any other choice, and those who do so are obviously bearing great grief on their shoulders for both their lives and the futures of Hong Kong. Even in the more less extreme cases of the protesters blocking the traffic, non-protesters who are against these actions speak as if they're a privileged class with the legitimacy to condemn protesters when they accuse them. They don't realize that they're also part of society and owe a duty to the oppressed classes. And they don't realize that these protesters are fighting for the same rights which they are benefiting from. It's true that they have a right to go to work, these non-supportive non-protesters, but ultimately the right to life, the right to fairness and justice, is a right that no other rights can overtake, which obviously does not include the right to work. They might seem inconvenient to some people, but the principle of lesser evil means that we might have to sacrifice some of these conveniences for the greater good for the wider society. Police immunity is a threat to security, and protesters are fighting against that. There are differences between frontline actions and police brutality. One of them is state-sanctioned, backed by the CCP, have access to actual weapons. And on the other side, you have us fighting for democracy. If you still think of comparing them in the day and age after hearing from us, that is simply a disproportionate imbalance on how you weigh up the builds of two sides.